Let me just start by thanking the Ukrainian Society for inviting the IJR and the Desmond Leah Tutu Foundation for this very solemn marking of a year of a full-scale invasion, 9 years of war. I convey apologies for my executive director, Professor Cheryl Hendricks. She would have liked to be here, but she's traveling out of the country. So this is a very, very tragic and a brutal war, which continues to unfold. And I think the performance was absolutely excellent. Well done. Very moving, very emotional, very powerful. I didn't know what to expect, but I found myself getting drawn in to the stage and those innermost sentiments of those people who are the Ukrainian people, who are facing the war on a daily basis, enduring the oppression and the brutality. It came through, and also, I think for me as a father of a 10-year-old daughter, I really cannot imagine the terrible toil that is that this conflict is having on young children in Ukraine. And I think the shoes, I think that's, at that point, I really began to feel a little bit emotional from that performance. So the IJR works in the area of peace building and does stand very much in solidarity with all the people of Ukraine in their struggle against the tyranny that is threatening to overwhelm them. The IJR is a peace and justice organization, and we actively work to prevent violent conflict. Where conflict is occurring, we actively work to end the conflict. And the majority of our work focuses on supporting countries that have experienced conflict across Africa and around the world to provide advice to governments, intergovernmental organizations, people affected by war. Since the war, the full-scale invasion started a year ago, we have done and we have convened a number of interventions with the Ukrainian Society of South Africa, with Zvinka in particular, including seminars. A wide range of members of the Ukrainian and South African Society have been involved in this discussion. Most recently, we partnered with Zvinka for an online workshop with university students from Ukraine and from South Africa, who were exchanging views on their perspectives and the impressions of conflict. And the one thing that did emerge from that discussion was the whole concept of what does a just peace look like? What does just peace mean? So one day the war will come to an end, because all wars eventually come to an end. The overriding question, I think, for the Ukrainian society will be how justice can be done for the victims and the survivors of violence, and how can a society find peace and in pursuit of that justice. I think South Africa is on that journey. It has its own history of the oppression and the brutality of the past in the form of slavery, colonialism, and apartheid. Today, racial discrimination on the basis of skin color, corruption continues, socioeconomic inequality persists. And I think you heard from the performance, Mampili Rampili's voice speaking to these themes, that underneath the South African body politic, there's a lot of healing that still needs to be done. The journey is not yet over. So I think it's very appropriate for South Africans and Ukrainians, Africans and Ukrainians, to walk together on this journey, addressing the violence, the legacy of the violence within our societies. When the guns are finally silent in Ukraine, what form will that just peace take? Will it simply be a negative peace defined only by the absence of violence? Or will there be scope to forge and build a positive peace, a just peace, based on addressing human rights violations, the atrocities of the war, We heard that 65,000 war crimes have been committed in this last 12 months. How do we begin to address all of these issues? How do we document the truth of what's happened? How do we engage in self-introspection, surfacing the trauma that's been endured, putting in place places to restore and heal the victims and survivors? And what will it take to make reparations and repair the damage that has been endured by the people of Ukraine at a fundamental level of their humanity? And what about the perpetrators? Is simply prosecution sufficient? What more will it take? And transformation of the state as it continues on its journey of healing, I think will be crucial. Archbishop Desmond Tutu, the chairperson of the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission, when he was live, he guided the South African society through these processes in supporting individuals and communities as they were dealing with the legacies of the past. And he encouraged us to always find ways to support each other, even in our state of trauma and woundedness. We nevertheless have a responsibility, when we can find it within ourselves, to help those who are around us also walk along that journey of healing. So we are, in effect, wounded healers. And I think that came through in the performance, when you would see the three performers sitting with their backs to each other and rising up almost in solidarity. I think there's a very poignant image that is left in my mind of the nature of the work that we are doing going forward.